Okay, so here's what the discussion's going to start from. Now, here the few rules though. One is no bogarting the mic. Monologue. This is not a monologuing moment. Secondly, we want to hold a loose grip on the steering wheel in this conversation and let it organically go where it wants to go. And as people sit down and participate in the conversation, to make sure there's room for them, to let them join in. So I'm going to hand you a mic, and here's where we'll start. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to actually engage, to do the work in open source? Some of the pitfalls, maybe, that you've seen or experienced yourself, and potentially any unexpected, positive or otherwise, outcomes that you've seen through engaging. Okay, I'll hand this to you. Thank you.
Sure. You want to go first?
You can.
Well, I can go first. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, I think I had the pleasure of working with the OWN Lab for a while, and obviously I've been learning a lot from the best in the market, leaders and all of that. I've learned that solution exists really, with open source, and many innovation can happen much faster. And I also learned that there are a lot of challenges because you're always dealing with the incumbents and existing vendors who really are a little bit they feel at risk. And I don't think they should feel that way, because I heard from my executives that AT&T pays for value, and so has other vendors and all of that. I also learned that there is a lot of opportunities towards 5G and coming forward that we need to go get. I mean, Kat has kind of mentioned that. And without us moving towards open source, without unlocking basically the aggregation points and basically collapse solutions and vendor lock solution, we will not be able to catch up or sync up with where the market is going and all of that. So I'm learning that through open source, we can be basically, that we can create that environment collectively as an industry to support really faster innovation, unlock solution, and really move the whole industry going forward faster.
Yeah, I want to second that. And the thing that I experience on the positive side is that you have innovation with no barrier. You don't have, if you will, you're vulnerable as a vendor in that, open source itself poses some hidden, if you will, impact to your bottom line, but there's additional opportunities. There's opportunities to think outside of the bar. So in my experiences, what I enjoy the most about open source communities, it's not about the hat that I wear. I'm bringing my value add, what I can contribute to the team, whether that's through product management, industry experiences, roll up my sleeves, be a part of the actual, experience as a Scrum Master. That's what I enjoy the most about it.
It's interesting because when you start open source, your role changes. In a company, when you're building software, if you're a lead particularly, you have clear authority to go directional. You work with your team, you try to find the best idea in your team, but there is kind of an authority chain, and someone's at the top of that chain that sets a direction. In open source, that chain's completely blown apart because you now go to an influence rule because no one is in control in some sense. In some sense, everyone's in control. Often it's going to be, I have to influence other people outside my company with a different point of view to believe in my direction. I have to prove that. I have to prove it with facts, right? It can't just be, hey, I have this intuition. Here's why. I have to explain it. And so beyond that development role that you also have this influence role that you have to keep going at. And that's a different change. And it's not for everyone, particularly if you come from a long history working within a closed source community. You have to change that role and adapt to that. You also run into other
what
issues.
I can jump into.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I got a little nervous there. The other thing you have to do is say, where can I contribute, right? Don't just come at an open source project and say, oh, this is screwed up, right? This is completely wrong. Because the open source community will look at you and go, so what? What are you going to do about it, right? You have to come with a solution to the problem and not just poke fingers at the problem. And I think that's an important thing as well.
So it's great, and I'm all for the mutual admiration society that can happen when a lot of people who are pro open source are talking to other people who are pro open source. But can you talk a little bit also about some of the pitfalls that you've seen, or places where people get stuck? Or I mean, you just started to talk about it here, but where else? I don't know about warning signs, but what's the underside of it?
Personalities. People are difficult. And in open source, and I'm one of them, so it's okay. You have a lot of A-type personalities in open source communities a lot of times, and they'll butt heads. Before I was involved in ON Labs, or while I was involved with ON Labs, I was also involved in Open Daylight. And you see this in both communities, where you have strong opinions, strong ideas, and sometimes the mailing list can get messy. And you have to watch out in terms of that. Don't make it personal. Your code isn't you. Just because someone thinks your code's cruddy doesn't mean they don't think you're a great person with value, right? And so you have to watch out. Sometimes these things become very personal. Someone called my baby ugly. I got to push back to prove my baby's pretty.
So how do I deal with that if I'm not necessarily the person who is engaged, is on the mailing list, or somebody who is fully in the thick of it and contributing, but maybe somebody who doesn't participate so much but is managing teams that are participating?
One of the challenges I ran into was getting my junior engineers to actually go out there and be vocal, right? Don't just talk to me. Go be part of the community. I shouldn't be the conduit. There should be no one person as a conduit to the community. Everybody should have a voice. Go out and ask stupid questions. I had a stupid question just the other day on Slack about some of the Docker layering stuff, and Zach answered. And I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I looked at research and I said, I'm wrong, right? You have to have that ability to say, I'm wrong. And the junior engineers have to have the ability to go out there and say, ask the stupid questions. No one on open source that I've seen has really, just bashed someone because they asked an honest, stupid question. If you ask, a question to be snide, which I probably have done too, you'll get bashed for that, and rightfully so. Right? Get your ego out of the way, let people bash you, and when it's appropriately, gently bash someone else.
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead.
Well, I was going to just offer a perspective on I think the critical success factors are actually the challenges as well, and I would call them the 4 C's. And that would be, the first one is collaboration. And what does collaboration really mean? It means that we have to bring together disparate organizations that actually have different interests, and then try to blend them into the next C, which is a community. And that community needs to be sustainable. And in order to do that, what we need to do is to incentivize contribution, the next one, which is, how do we get organizations to actually contribute resources, contribute their time, contribute their facilities, contribute funding to actually sustain these projects long term, not to mention the communities that are really the underpinning behind these projects. And then the next one is, the next C, and maybe the most important one, is cash. Well, what do I mean? I mean to incentivize the overall organizational participation by giving and offering and providing those incentives, so that not only will organizations participate, but how do organizations actually benefit? If we can't create a sustainable ecosystem where many can benefit, many can profit, many can actually protect their commercial interests, then we're not going to create a sustainable community. So to be
1 minute warning.
Okay, so to address the broader picture, what we're really working toward is how to sustain these viable communities that are very diverse across many organizations, and then be able to ensure that each one benefits up and down the ecosystem.
Can I make a request? People introduce themselves first before talk.
I'm Mark Cohn from the Linux Foundation.
Thank you.
Do you have something to add? Because we're going to wrap.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Hi, my name is Mei Chen. I'm from Huawei. So, Mark, I think you are bringing a very good point. So that's my question to you guys too. So working in an open source, community is very exciting from a corporation perspective and individual perspective. So people, meeting with latest technology, working with different people and different companies. But one of the challenging is how do you empower the people to participate and also make business make value judgment on their contribution to the community and their company? What are your suggestions? I mean, what are your,
I had a chance, so I'm going to give others.
all your suggestions?
Yeah, but so that's an excellent question, May. So I'm Evan Parker from Calix. Excellent question, and I would say to the community, just jump in. I mean, both ONOS and the Open Core projects are very open to newcomers, and they're really architected to encourage newcomers. Like, say, for example, Cord on a Box. You can just go to the Open Cord website, download it, get it running, and if you have any problems, people like David Bainbridge over there are quick to answer your questions on the mailing list, as he did mine. Well, you got me going, so thanks for that. So yeah, my recommendation would be just to go and jump in and get started.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good question.
Joe Tartar from Broadcom. I want to actually change the subject a little bit. And part of it is the obstacles to open source. From a company that's more traditionally focused, we have been increasingly involved in open source projects, started with open APIs, which is not really open source, but we've actually started moving forward from that with great plans. But there's always the issue with legal and governance. And this is where Linux Foundation comes in to basically provide that legal umbrella governance, I guess, umbrella.
So Joe, let me challenge you.
I'm going to time us.
okay.
I'm going to time us. Thank you so much. I'm going to time us, and I know it's abrupt to stop in the middle, but let me just say thank you for that. Yep. Thank you for that. And you all can stay here just for a moment. To get us back on time, we're going to break now and go for lunch. But before we do, just like to say you can continue these conversations throughout the day. Find participants who were in this panel. And I'd like to also note that there are some key elements in open source that were present here today. One is there is always an open chair. There's always an opportunity for somebody to plug in a space for them that is reserved for participation. Secondly, I loved there was a moment here, David, where you actually tapped May and invited her into the conversation. Who was it? Somebody else did. Yeah, that's right, because sometimes having a space to plug in isn't enough, but actually an invitation is what gets people to participate. And you'll have an opportunity to do that for one another throughout the rest of the day when we collaborate and do some workshop stuff upstairs. So I'd like to thank you all very much for your participation in the Unpanel just now. And we're going to go to a break.